Move aside, monarch of the glen, we've got trees to plant. How Scotland's speed greening will have far-reaching consequences.
We're going for the maximum rather than the optimum.
Oh, like that.
Rabbit revival. Tom Davies finds a pot of pure bunny on Dartmoor. What will you do with your old side-by-side when Boris Johnson bans lead? We ask our vintage guns expert.
I think it's a real tragedy that our firearms history, all these beautiful things that we've made and we've got, are heading relentlessly overseas.
We have a £600 riflescope from Meopta to give away. We have news with a last-ditch attempt to save pheasant and partridge shooting this coming season. We have Hunting YouTube. Welcome to Fieldsports Britain. Kill deer, plant trees, save the planet. Not as catchy as hands, face, space, but it appears to be the green mantra, especially here in Scotland. Traditional Scottish sporting estates are changing because there's money in them their hills, not in the shape of venison, burgers or trophy stags, but lots and lots of carbon-consuming trees. Now, because deer love eating young trees, there's pressure on deer managers, such as Niall Rowantree, to keep their numbers in check, and for ecologist Dr. Cathy Mayne to assess the impacts of those deer. But what if their efforts are undermined by the very people who make up the rules?
So to keep our same comedy of errors, David, you and I went in onto the A85 on a high-speed carriageway in Argyll, close to the village of Tyndrum. I'm coming off the corner of the deer path, and suddenly I'm free and I'm back out into the wild again. And you saw me walk down a fence onto the main carriageway and literally go like that. So all I'm doing here is walking from the Shield Bridge Deer Forest onto the Forestry Commission holding. So I'm now on the public estate. If I was a red deer stag, I can now be shot out of season and at night. I come straight back toward you for overemphasising the point. None of the things I just said apply anymore. I'm now back in a deer forest and I'm a wild free-ranging deer.
You may remember us filming this fence line before. It prevents deer entering a protected site. The plant species in here are of international importance, so you'd expect the authorities to make every effort to control deer finding their way in.
Now, the tragedy of this is this was filled in with tarmac in March of this year. I'm not aware, and I'm vice chair of the Deer Management Group, that there was any consultation from Forest and Land Scotland or Nature Scot that they intended to remove this deer grid and never replace it. And yet we're told by them at deer group meetings that the red deer are having an unsustainable impact on the Sunnet oak forest. Now we're doing our best with habitat monitoring, management and culling to deliver deer management out here. They tell us they can't deliver their best without shooting deer out of season and at night.
And yet we've got a gate there which is supposed to be closed, and
yep.
We've got what should be a barrier to deer movement that has now been tarmacked over. Why would they tarmac it? What was wrong with it?
Well, the old grid, I think we'll find, was the welds were starting to break in it, and like a lot of these little highland roads now, there's bigger and bigger vehicles coming down them, and you've got lorries now that are over 30 tonnes coming over this old steel grid, and I think the grid just was at the end of its working life. What I thought when we first saw it filled in was that they were going to replace it with a new grid. When it's been drawn to their attention, so far they've yet to respond as to what they intend to do. But I really think it adds insult to injury that not only is the grid gone, but we're just leaving the gate open too.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is that the forestry rangers are shooting deer that are literally walking down here along the road and in they go. And at this time of year, particularly it's frosty as we've looked at before, they're spreading salt and molasses on the road. So the deer are coming down, they're browsing and grazing on the shoreline. This fence is naturally funneling them to here and into an open space that takes them into that woodland. Now, if you want people to work together, if we want to use terms like collaborative deer management, if we want to reduce the burden on the taxpayer, then we can't very well publish national documents when FLS blame the landowners outside for their deer problems, and then basically come on things like this. Because this doesn't encourage people to collaborate. This encourages people to not want to work together. And it's just a joke. Disappointing.
To add insult to injury, Cathy's photographed a gate at the top of this protected site that's left open.
I find this unacceptable because the pressure still remains on the rest of the deer management group that somehow their actions are to blame for this site being in unfavourable condition. And I don't think as a taxpayer I'm happy to have paid for a fence to protect a commercial crop and elements of native woodland that are here that are important for the designation, to then have that being used actively as a deer trap, paying a guy to shoot deer that otherwise would be outside the fence. That doesn't make sense to me.
Now, of course, it's not just deer to be found on the west coast of Scotland. There's a fabulous array of other wildlife. On our way to catch up with some hinds, we get our first look at the local otters. David was starting to doubt their existence up here.
Years I've been coming here. Years.
Yeah, I told you they were here. You just didn't believe me.
I didn't believe you.
Well, you've got them now.
Yeah. So, are they successful at the moment? Are they breeding okay?
The otters here, this area of Loch Soonart's one of the best areas in the west coast of Scotland, if not in the British Isles, to see otters. And yeah, in this part of Loch Soonart there's about 20 pairs.
Next, we bump into some greylags along the coast road. Their numbers are becoming an issue for the crofters. There needs to be a balance between community and wildlife.
So 25, 30 years ago, we probably had between 50 and 100 geese tops. We now have wintering with us, and particularly if they start culling them on newest, we can have between 400 and 600 geese here, and sometimes a little more. The problem we have is that improved grazings, which is what they're on here, and you can see the silage bales on the right, there's limited amounts of it, and the geese are competing and impacting on these grasslands, which they try and use in the spring of the year to put the sheep on when they're lambing, and then take a silage crop off. And they're not the easiest geese to cull. It's not where you can sort of flight them. We've tried, there's been a lot of time and effort, and Stevie's sort of guided a lot of guys to try and do it, and the success that we have is quite limited. An awful lot of the geese here are shot with a rifle, far less a shotgun. And every year the numbers just seem to be doubling.
Best calibre for goose?
Well, we try various calibers, to be honest. The problem at the moment is we can't sell them.
Why can't you sell them?
It's prohibited. You're not allowed to sell geese.
I didn't know that.
So I mean, if we could, then it would offset some of our costs of managing them. Because in the next month or so, we'll need to shoot 300 or 400 geese at least. At least.
Maybe we'll discover the best calibre for geese on another visit, but it's unlikely to be as big as the round Cathy and Stevie will be using on the hinds this afternoon.
It's very difficult in this landscape to separate the impacts of cattle and sheep away from the impacts of deer. So what I try and do is keep the deer population on Ben Heand to around about 90 adult hinds. And it's a selective process, making sure whatever we leave, David, as you've seen and done here with us before, we're leaving the best, taking away the poorest, and trying to keep the group sizes when we can down to around about 10, which is sort of a sensible number for adult females. It allows them to use this terrain effectively. We'll try and set up so you take two away together, minimum stress, maximum effect, and a good quality venison product at the end of it. So we're going to cut off round here, and I would think that group will be drawn up through the gully in front of us. And if you let Cathy go first and you just slip in and tidy up. Perfect. So off we go. Part of this is a numbers exercise, so we need to take about at least 5 adult hinds out of this group over the next few weeks. She's clocked you, so just take her through the shoulder, Stevie on the calf. Oh. Yeah, she's got her, the hinds have tumble, the calf's standing looking back. Needs to shot the calf in the neck. Okay, now hold your horses. Right hand group coming onto the top. David, get on them on the camera.
Yeah, oh, they're moving now.
They're moving now. Yep, she's not going to stop you.
Niall hopes that another shot will present itself, but he's happy to have got those two, by stalkers with very different levels of experience, which he always takes into account.
You've got one end of the spectrum where you've got people that are cutting venison, that are saying to people that are going out stalking deer, shoot them in the head or neck. And then the other end of the spectrum is the fact that you've got population to reduce and you want to do it humanely, so you don't want any errors. And in that situation there, you've got a guy that shot thousands of deer.
That was mine, number 47.
Exactly. And your shot there, a rib shot, absolutely perfect, hind is killed, you're confident and happy with that shot.
Yeah.
And it would be entirely wrong of me to say to you, Cathy, I want you to shoot that in the neck. And it would probably be worse for you to attempt it, to feel you had to do that to make me happy. And that's why I personally am opposed to a lot of the encouragement of people going at the moment, you must shoot them in the head, you must shoot them in the neck. You must shoot them humanely.
Yeah.
And that's a judgment of what you can do yourself. So, no problem at all. As you say, number 47, number 1,000 and what? Thousands and what?
Now on this part of the peninsula the deer are free to roam, but not far away it's all change. Fences now cut across historic ranges of the Reds to protect new tree plantations. Plantations that are sometimes in areas that should be avoided, such as deep peat environments. The government classes deep peat as anything over 50 centimetres.
So I'm 6 foot tall. So take your own measurement with your eye there, pick a spot, and the stick's still going down and still going down. So there the peat on a knoll is that depth.
How can this be allowed to happen then? I thought they've now decided that peat's good.
Well, I think we'll get Cathy to come in and talk to us here.
Is this not environmental vandalism?
We're planting trees in order to sequester carbon.
But you're releasing it. That's releasing it.
If we're planting trees in the wrong substrate, then we're actually creating a net carbon loss rather than a gain.
That's greenwash there, right there.
So it doesn't make sense. But the reason why this happens is because it's expensive to do a vegetation survey and a peat depth survey sufficiently small scale, sufficiently high resolution to capture where you should and you shouldn't plant trees.
To emphasise the point, we are now on bogland near Fort William, where Cathy is monitoring peat depth. Cathy feels we could be sleepwalking into a greenwash tree planting policy, which we could end up regretting.
I've got nearly 2 metres of peat where I'm standing. And there are trees right there. And there were trees right there. Because what we do now will have repercussions for years, decades and centuries. We need to be really sure that what we're doing is the right thing, because the time frame within which we make most policy decisions just doesn't apply here. So we need to be very certain that our policy is the right thing to be doing. We can't afford to get it wrong. And this is such a good example of how it has been got wrong in the past. And I fear that what we're doing at the moment, in many ways, it's really good. There's lots that's really good. But we're going for the maximum rather than the optimum.
Oh, like that. That's true, I get it though, I get it.
Yeah.
So this is number 47?
Yes.
Well done.
Back to our hind and calf, and Niall delivers the post-mortem.
What do you notice about the middle of her body? What's that big telltale giveaway sign?
Big fat.
Big full belly.
She's quite lean.
Yeah, big full belly. So when we were looking at a group of deer, there's other places we've been the last few days you've seen poorer deer, but compared with the rest of that group, she stood out for age, coat condition.
Yeah. And I mean, normally that hind would be okay, but in the context of this particular population, that classes as a poor hind.
That's a poorer hind.
Tell me about the tummy.
What you'll find as they get older and their teeth start to wear, and we were looking at this the other night, one of the telltale signs you'll see is not only the condition of the coat starting to go, but very often you'll see older hinds with great big bellies on them. And what they're doing is, as their ability to break the vegetation falls, it doesn't mean that they reduce. What they do is they increase their grazing amount because they're drawing in more and more all the time. And very often, because they're thin, when you look at them, this bulbous stomach stands out, and then the thin body attached to it. It almost looks like a sort of a ball suspended from the rib cage in the back. Yeah. And if you walk around it, and it's a thing you won't see in deer in the south because a lot of them are in great condition, but you look around them, you will see an awful lot worse. But you can see in her the coat's starting to go, and if you look at it, you can see her hips.
It's been another fascinating trip to see Niall, Cathy and Stevie. They're witnessing a shift in Scottish land use, partly aimed at stamping out traditional land use such as country sports, but which will bizarrely fuel a greater need for deer managers. What will become of traditional Highland stalking as it's demoted to simple pest control? Thank you, Niall and Cathy. Next up, as profound as Scottish deep peat, it's David on the Fieldsports Channel News Stump.
This is Fieldsports Channel News. The French and Westminster governments are poised to rule on the fate of the next shooting season. Bird flu has been holding up the import of pheasant and partridge poults from France to the UK. DEFRA civil servants could reduce the clear of disease times from 90 days to 28 days in line with EU standards. If they don't, birds may not be exported to the UK until the autumn. Too late for this shooting season. Millions of birds are ready and waiting for export. If the civil servants fail to act, the chicks will be macerated by the end of May, and thousands of jobs in pheasant shooting will be at risk. The Game Farmers Association and the National Gamekeepers Organisation are asking their members to lobby their MPs to encourage DEFRA to make this decision, which appears to be political and nothing to do with bird welfare. There's a link to the NGO website with information about what to do in the description below.
In the next day or two, NGO members are going to have an email from us telling them how they can help us to help them. There's a lot that still needs to be done, not just for this year but for next year, although time is really ticking on. The NGO are talking about special licences and have been talking to the highest possible level of DEFRA ministers, not just employees within DEFRA itself. We understand that we're now in mid-May and this may not be possible, but there still needs to be work needs to be done for next year, and we need gamekeepers and shoot owners to be able to lobby to get the right results going forward.
A fire on Calderdale Moor in West Yorkshire is now under control. Thanks to the rapid response of local gamekeepers who were first on the scene, only around 70 acres of moorland has been damaged. The gamekeepers had put in fire breaks before the nesting season, which slowed the fire. ITV News, which sent a reporter to the scene, chose not to recognise the work of the gamekeepers in their coverage of the event, despite local fire officers from West Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service praising keepers. A month ago, crews from West Yorkshire Fire Service hung a banner from a Calderdale landmark urging people not to light fires, barbecues or fireworks on moorland. A 21-year-old gamekeeper from Wiltshire has been summoned to Magistrates Court in what police describe as potentially the largest English raptor prosecution case. The keeper's facing 6 charges under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. He's also accused of 3 firearms offences. He's appearing at Swindon Magistrates Court on the 25th of May 2020. Police say the case follows 2 years of investigation. Raptor persecution cases have been falling for nearly 20 years. This is the first by Wiltshire Police under the National Operation OWL, set up at the request of the RSPB. Do you fancy a job trapping mink? Nature Scott, formerly Scottish Natural Heritage, is advertising for a mink trapper for the Isle of Lewis. It pays £23,000 a year, but it doesn't say if you can keep the skins. Link in the description below. Thanks to Richard Walton for the story. Archaeologists have discovered hunting pits more than 10,000 years old under Stonehenge. They unearthed thousands of pits believed to have been used by prehistoric hunters at the site in Wiltshire. probably to trap large game such as aurochs, red deer and wild boar. One was 13 feet wide and more than 6 feet deep, making it the largest of its kind in northwest Europe. Researchers from the University of Birmingham and Ghent University say there is a 7,000-year gap between the earliest and most recent pit. At the time the largest pit was dug, the stone circle hadn't been erected. The Links to Scotland project has been exploring how to bring back the big cat. The project is a collaboration between 3 anti-hunting organisations: the Vincent Wildlife Trust, Scotland the Big Picture and Trees for Life. It says it's consulting people in rural and wildlife organisations in Argyll and the Cairngorms National Park, adding that opinions are divided, with supporters saying links could be good for wildlife tourism and create more balanced, biodiverse woodland ecosystems. Opponents fear the big cat will attack sheep and tourists will never see them. The report recommends setting up a working group to examine the points of disagreement. Swedish politicians have voted to halve the number of wolves. Fierce debate about the future of the animals in Sweden led to members of the country's Environment and Agriculture Committee deciding to reduce numbers from around 460 to 170. The committee also proposed that Sweden and Norway manage the wolf tribes together as the animals move back and forward across the border. Thanks to Per Helmseth for the story. The overpopulation of elephants in southern Africa is causing more human deaths than usual. Elephants have killed 60 people so far this year in Zimbabwe, compared to 72 during the whole of 2021. The country has 100,000 of the animals, which is the second largest population after Botswana. Numbers are growing at around 5% a year. Talking to a reporter on a visit to Brussels, the Namibian Environment Minister spoke out on the problem in his country.
They become nuisance now. We do not know what to do with them. Communities are complaining that, please, they become too much.
New York State has approved a bill that could ban the import of hunting trophies. The Big Five Trophies Act now moves to the Environmental Conservation Committee in Assembly. If lawmakers continue to vote yes, it could ban the importation, transportation and possession of elephant, lion, leopard, white and black rhinos and giraffe. Safari Club International says it flies in the face of decades worth of scientific research that shows hunting generates incentives to protect habitat, reduce poaching and encourage local people to help with the conservation of these species. Robbie Kruger of the Blood Origins channel on YouTube says the bill is a violation of the human rights of the people of Africa. He criticises Senator Todd Kaminsky for supporting it.
What that bill is going to do is take away the right of people halfway around the world to decide how to manage their wildlife. The state of New York is saying we know better. I wonder if Todd Kaminsky's constituents that know that he is a proponent of this knows that he's taking away the rights of humans all across Africa. Not just humans, not people who live in fancy urban sprawls like New York, but people who have no electricity, no running water, no nothing. And he's saying, no, I know better.
The Duke of Northumberland's estate and Storey Homes are supporting 2 charity shoots that are raising money for youngsters in the north of the UK. The John Shallcross Memorial Shoots in Alnwick raises money for the NE Youth Group, which supports young people across the region. They take place on the 8th and 10th of July 2022, and the cost for a team of 4 is £650 on one day and £1,200 on the other. More details about the shoots are in the description below. And finally, a fisherman in the US has caught a 300-pound alligator gar. Texas angler Peyton Moore wrestled the 8-foot predator on film in a bayou near Houston. He says it was strong and heavy. It may have been a world record, currently standing at 327 pounds, but before he could get it to a scale for an official weigh-in, it escaped. The gar, like the sturgeon, can live for decades. The prehistoric relatives of the alligator are thought to have been around 157 million years ago.
I could fish for the rest of my life and not ever see one like that again, and it's I'm sorry. It's almost emotional.
Thanks to Mark Corney for the story. You are now up to date with Fieldsports Channel News. Stalking the stories fishing for facts.
Now, our Big Garden Pestwatch competition is continuing to bring in entries. Chris Each filmed a magpie after starlings in Staffordshire, and viewer Hayden filmed this stoat making off with a hen pheasant in Scotland. Thanks for those. Remember, we're after video footage or a still photo of pests or vermin stealing eggs, nestlings, though livestock is fine too. Keep them coming so we can show the public why we need to control pest species. The best one will win a Browning trail cam priced at more than £100. Next is the bunny bouncing back. Tom Davies finds suitable numbers in Devon. The rabbits are back, maybe only in some areas and in some small numbers, but here in Devon, Tom Davies reports growing populations. He's out on them with new thermal kit from Pulsar, the Axion 2 LRF spotter and the Krypton scope attachment.
But out on a rabbit problem this evening on some drilled wheat. They've eaten the margins in by about 10 yards, I suppose, all the way around. So we're just going to try and thin them out before it all gets up too high and I won't be able to see them at all. So if I can keep those numbers down, it'll be happy farmer and some happy locals that are going to eat some rabbits.
There is one big berry on this farm and Tom has to sneak up on it.
Ready. Nice and quiet, didn't want to scare the rabbits.
He spots his first in an outlying hole on the way in.
Yeah, I think it's a baby rabbit. It's the only head I can see, but I think it's sat on the edge of a hole.
The Axion earned its spurs there.
It's their new model. See, nice little tidy unit. I haven't tried on rabbits yet, so be interested to see how it works. But so far on deer and foxes, it's been, yeah, for the price bracket and everything, it's absolutely spot on. And it fits in your pocket and your hand lovely.
One thing Tom's wishes he has is a lanyard to hold the spotter around his neck.
Rabbit there, I was flapping around trying to get this in my pocket and it made too much noise.
We need to skirt the top side of the field to get downwind of the rabbits on the bottom hedge. By the time we get into position for the bunny motherload, it's dark and Tom puts on his thermal scope attachment.
Yeah, so as soon as that light started to go and I couldn't see from my day scope, I got it out of my pocket, clipped it straight on. So it took 5 seconds, I suppose, 10 seconds to get that on. It was still light, but I was struggling to see the rabbits in like a dark area.
It does the job. Here's a rabbit recorded through the scope. Tom goes on to shoot half a dozen in under 5 minutes. They don't know what's going on until it's too late. Job done. For Tom, thermal is a tool. Lamping is still a joy.
If I'm out doing a job, like, farmer calls me, I've got some rabbits that are causing issues, I'd go out with all my thermal kit and I'd go there and just do what I've got to do. If I had some people who wanted to go out, do a bit of rabbit shooting, then probably get the lamps out. You can have like more fun with a group of people with a lamp and stuff. It's just, yeah. When you're a kid, at least how I grew up shooting rabbits, it's it always takes you back to that sort of time. So yeah, it's good fun.
For more about Pulsar's kit, visit the UK distributor's website, thomasjacks.co.uk. And for more about Tom, you can find Dartmoor Deer Services on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you, Tom. Now, this week's Fieldsports Extra prize draw is for a Meopta scope. It's a new 3 to 18 by 50 with a 4C reticle. RRP is £617. Thanks to Ruag for donating it. Easiest way to enter the draw to win it is to become a member of the Fieldsports Nation. Follow the link in the description below to do that, where you will also find a link to the scope itself. Next up, the phony war over lead shot, lead airgun pellets and lead bullets is over. The government is preparing to act. Here's what it means for old guns.
Shooters claim the new report on banning lead ammunition by the Health and Safety Executive could signal the beginning of the end of the use of vintage guns that can't use alternatives. Gun dealers already have customers wanting to sell their collections.
Within 24 hours of the announcement by the Health and Safety Executive that they were getting serious on an outright lead ban for everything, I had this guy on the phone saying, time to sell it. In fact, sell all my guns. I'll send them to you next week. He's got these guns. He doesn't see that they have any future. And I think he's just future-proofing himself rather than having money sitting there in something which he thinks probably isn't going to be very safe or useful in the future. And he just took the decision, get rid of it all.
The proposed restrictions closely reflect EU REACH proposals. They would apply to shotgun, rifle and airgun ammunition. They will impact all 600,000 live quarry shooters and an estimated 4 million target and air rifle shooters in the UK.
It's very difficult when you're trying to present evidence to people who don't want to use the evidence in a neutral way to find a fair solution. And you can see they're thinking. They've come up with the headline, lead is toxic and the safe amount of lead is 0. And that informs their conclusions, because if they were to if they take that line, it would then be irresponsible of them, if that were true, for them to make any exceptions at all. Because if they say the safe level is 0, to say, well, we'll let airgun users carry on, or we'll let historic gun users carry on, well, that's more than 0. And they've said 0 is the safe level. So they would be making nonsensical recommendations based on their own assertions and findings. So it's self-perpetuating. Once they've come up with that headline, you know where they're going with it.
BASC says the HSE proposals won't change the voluntary 5-year transition period that the shooting community has agreed to.
If you look at the timelines of when this regulation potentially might come in, actually it would go on beyond the end of that 5-year voluntary transition, and BASC, along with the other shooting organisations, are continuing and are committed to continuing that voluntary transition, because actually for a number of reasons it's important to continue to support people within the community and within the sector making that transition. We do quite a lot of sort of advice and education around it through BASC. We do quite a lot of opportunity stuff through our Try Sustainable Ammunition Day. So it's important to continue with that, and actually it's one of the things that in the dossier is recognised, that the voluntary transition is one of the things they recognise is helping to reduce some of the risk which falls around lead shot being deposited into the environment.
Shooting is worth £2 billion to the UK economy, and more than 74,000 people are employed by the sector. Shooters fear the changes will mean many won't be able to afford to continue.
What's changed is that they're planning to ban lead shot for everything, not just live quarry. So your recreational sporting clay shooter is going to find that his intention to go out with his old Purdy and shoot sporting clays, that's not really going to be viable anymore, because it won't work with steel, and your 100-bird day out on a Sunday up on an Essex side-by-side shoot isn't going to cost you 50 quid anymore. It's going to cost you 150 quid. And if you do that every Sunday, it's not viable now for most people who do it casually.
BASC, the Gun Trade Association, the British Shooting Council and UK manufacturers will be taking part in the consultation process to protect the shooting community.
We've now got a 6-month public consultation, we've got scientific scrutiny, we've got socio-economic impact assessments to go through, and BASC, so we've got ourselves registered as an accredited stakeholder, so we'll be able to input into those consultation periods. So it's now really a case of sort of reviewing the evidence, looking at the gaps, challenging where we can, and making sure that what if anything ends up forming legislation is necessary, it's proportionate to the risk that is there, and then ultimately if there are going to be bans which come through eventually through law is actually making sure those transition periods are realistic.
The 6-month public consultation closes on November the 6th, 2022. Some shooters fear it's already too late to make a difference.
In the short term, there's the potential there that I will get a lot of firearms from England, from people who no longer want them, and I'll sell them to Americans, Australians, New Zealanders who do want them. I don't like that happening because I think it's a real tragedy that our firearms history, all these beautiful things that we've made and we've got, are heading relentlessly overseas. I wrote an article about it 20 years ago, trying to encourage English people to revere their history and their heritage more, because it seemed to me that the Americans did and we didn't. But the reality of it is that may just be what happens now.
Thanks, Diggory and Dan. Now, our Field Tester Friday last week covered modern semi-autos. Anyone thinking of buying a semi-auto? I hope you'll find it useful. There's a link to it in the description below. It includes lots of films and many of the comments you made on YouTube about the semi-autos you own and love, plus some you're happy to have sold. The Beretta 303 is a following, as do semi-autos by Winchester, ATN and Frankie. And my favourite comment is from Jubes, who has a Stiga M3000, which cost him £375 new, which has, he says, been fully submerged in ditches, used as a walking stick, shot more than 3,000 cartridges, never been cleaned properly, and still never fails to cycle. Now, from fast shooters to the wider world of hunting and shooting on YouTube, it is Hunting YouTube. This is Hunting YouTube, which aims to show the top hunting and shooting videos that YouTube has to offer. Our own David Wright gets the spot shot treatment from Jack Pike and comes out of it really well. Yes, well done, David. I never knew he was one of the Wiggles. Next up, Pontypool Pest Control is back after a short break with a look over his kit plus a rabbit problem on one of his permissions. This channel, Man of Kent Catapults, Guns and Other Stuff, has a good quality moan about the forthcoming government plan to ban lead air rifle pellets. A little flavour of deer stalking in Hungary in this film. Tim from Hunting Room is after Fallow in German. It's a 30-minute promo for a longer film on his subscription video channel. Another foreign language film, this time Niccolo Stefanucci for Italian Fishing TV, is tuna fishing from Porto Garibaldi on the Med, reminding us Brits that we can go bluefin fishing in our own coastal waters. In Australia, Into the Mountains puts out its first hunting film for a year. Daz heads north to New South Wales in search of big red stags during the rut. Across the water in New Zealand, the Controlled Recoil NZ Hunting Channel puts out Long Range Mountain Goat. He is shooting on public land. And finally, Stories from the Wilds of Africa Part 8 is about Warden Ron Thompson, who cuts through the fake news about a male African lion that lived mainly in the Hwangi National Park in Zimbabwe and went by the name of Cecil. That's it for this week. I have put all these films into a playlist for you. Click on the eye symbol top right or check this film's description. If you have a YouTube film you would like us to pop into the weekly top 8, email me the link, charlie@fieldsportschannel.tv. Well, that's it for this week. If you haven't done so, please whiz over to our website, fieldsportschannel.tv, where you can click to like us on Facebook and on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube, pop your email address into our register page and we'll contact you about this show, Fieldsports Britain. It's at 7 p.m. UK time every Wednesday. And this has been Fieldsports Britain. Good hunting, good shooting, good fishing, and goodbye.